Alrighty, in this video we're going to be talking about how to become more disciplined. I think there are pretty much 9 avenues into becoming more disciplined, and they vary across this wide spectrum of human functioning. So I'm going to teach you many different ways into discipline, whether it be through your emotions, through your thinking, through your biology, your social interactions, through your context, through your relationship to yourself, through your motivation, through your attention. I'm going to teach you all 9 of those doorways that you can enter discipline through, because there are many ways to be more disciplined. Being human is actually very complex, and I know this as a psychologist because I work with people on a daily basis, and the kind of discipline technique that they have is often related to their specific kind of context that they're in. It's not the same for everyone, so no one discipline protocol or sort of routine or strategy or technique is going to work for you. What you need is going to be based on your context and what you're currently struggling with. So don't just assume that any other video that you watch online is going to work for you. So that's why I'm giving you a variety of techniques so that you can see what's going to work for you, and we can see where your discipline is going to be most easily built up. So let's start with the thinking domain. So if you want to increase your discipline through thinking, there's something you can use called cognitive reappraisal. This is a tool from therapy that I use with my clients. And basically, it's a way to think about things differently. In other words, to think about things from a more helpful perspective. Cognitive is just a fancy German word for thinking, and reappraisal means to see things differently. So cognitive reappraisal is thinking about things differently. And you can do that to help you with discipline. How do you do that to help you with discipline? Well, basically, if you're struggling with discipline, there could be some sort of way in which you're thinking about discipline that is inherently stressful. And if you're highly stressed, you're going to struggle with discipline. Psychological science is pretty clear on the fact that if you are highly stressed, you're going to struggle to do things that you don't feel like doing. That's why most of us fall into bad habits when we're stressed. It's because it's harder. It's harder to be disciplined when we're stressed. So managing your stress levels by managing the way you think about discipline can be really helpful. So you might be wondering, how can your way of thinking about discipline make you more stressed and thus more likely to be less disciplined? Well, the thing that happens is, I'll give you an example from my own life. So I've always thought about discipline as restrictive. So I had this way of framing discipline that if I'm going to diet, then I have to restrict myself. I'm not allowed to eat these things that I really enjoy. And man, I love the worst stuff. I love sugar, oil, oily foods, salty foods. I just love the stuff that's not good for my health. So when I'm trying to be disciplined in my diet, I often think in a very restrictive way. I can't eat this. I can't eat that. And that makes the experience very stressful, because I start off determined and I'm like, okay, I'm going to do it now. And I try to go all out and I'm engaging in some black and white thinking. And then when I go all out, it feels very stressful because I know I can't have this and that and that. And then this rebellious side of me comes out and it's like, Nevern, just eat whatever you want. Just go all out with whatever you want to eat. And then I go all out, I binge, because I thought about discipline as very restrictive. But recently I started thinking about discipline as, let's say, nurturing, or I thought of discipline as a route to success, as a route to creating the kind of life I want. You see, that kind of way of thinking of discipline is a lot more exciting, right? Because if I'm thinking discipline is going to get me everything I want, discipline is an ally, it's a friend, it's something that is going to help me, not hinder me, then suddenly my relationship to discipline changes. It's a lot less stressful, and I'm a lot more likely to abide by discipline because I know discipline is on my side. I know being disciplined is a form of self-compassion. Those ways of thinking about discipline make me more likely to stick to the discipline. So that's what you need to understand, is that the way in which you think about discipline can affect what the discipline feels like. You can make it more or less stressful. And if you make it more stressful, be careful, because that stress is going to catch up to you on that discipline journey. So your action step here is think about the way that you're thinking about discipline. Sort of take a step back and just think about, how am I thinking about discipline? What are my thoughts around it? You can write some of them down and then see if you can replace some of those thoughts with more helpful thoughts. just like I did. I went from thinking about discipline as restrictive to helpful, to helping me achieve my goals. You need to do the same so that you can turn discipline into something that's less stressful and more helpful. But remember, those thoughts have to be believable. You have to believe them. You can't just write anything. You can't write, discipline is going to solve all my life's problems. You have to believe it. So that's the thinking domain. Let's move on to the emotional domain now. The second way into discipline is through emotions, right? So you are trying to change your emotions as a way to be more disciplined. And the best way to change the way that you operate emotionally is to learn how to feel your feelings. It's to learn how to just be with whatever you're feeling. Because most of the time, when people are struggling with discipline, they're doing things that are to avoid emotions. For example, when I, in my own life, struggled with eating, I would oftentimes eat when I was stressed, when I was sad, when I was overwhelmed. And that kind of relationship to food meant that whenever I felt something difficult, I turned to food. And that made it really difficult to say no to the food, because if I said no to the food, I kind of had to deal with all these difficult emotions. Now I've got to be sad. Now I've got to be anxious. Now I've got to be overwhelmed. And I knew this was a thing because whenever I did decide, you know what, let me be a bit loose. Let me just get the kind of food I want. Oh man, I'd be super excited. My mood would suddenly change, I'd have life breathed into me. Whereas before I would feel depressed and down and demotivated and just blah, when you feel just blah, I would feel that way. But then as soon as I said, you know what, let me go to that fast food restaurant that I really crave food from, or let me get the ice cream that I really like, man, it's like my whole mood would change. And that to me was a sign that, wait a minute here, Nevern, your mood is really, really attached to comfort eating, to the way that you're eating. So it's attached to the things that usually cause your discipline to fail. And in order to overcome that, I've had to learn how to not rely on those ways of dealing with my emotions, such as through comfort eating, such as through drinking alcohol or anything like that. I've had to learn how to feel my feelings, because if I feel the sadness, if I'm really okay with that, if I'm okay with feeling the sadness or the anxiety or the overwhelm, then there's no need to turn to these coping mechanisms. There's no need to turn to drinking. There's no need to turn to eating. And that's what I noticed, that as I became a bit more forthright with my feelings, and look, this is a journey, guys. This doesn't happen overnight. But as I became better at feeling my feelings, and through my own therapy process and through my own working on myself and trying to grow emotionally, I became better. I became better at feeling my feelings, and I noticed that my discipline became better as well. It didn't feel like I was constantly running away from emotions and having to engage in these impulsive behaviors. I became more disciplined because I became more emotionally centered. So your action step here is to start feeling those feelings. It's hard. It's not easy to do. You're going to struggle. You're going to feel really despondent at times. You're going to not want to feel these things. I mean, I'm telling you to literally go to the places that you've been chronically avoiding. But you can learn how to do that. You can learn how to do that with time. And to learn how to feel your feelings is to learn how to connect to you. It's to learn how to make space for yourself. And that will slowly start to increase your discipline as a byproduct. So that's the second route into discipline. The third route is attention related. So we have this ability as human beings to move our attention around, because there are many things in reality. Right now I'm looking at a light, I'm looking at a desk, a phone, a mic, a camera, and I can choose to move my attention to light, phone, mic, camera. Everything is still in reality, but whatever I pay attention to becomes my reality. And it's very powerful to realize that, because that means that if what you pay attention to multiplies, if what you pay attention to grows, then you can use your attention intentionally. You can use it in an intentional way to help with your discipline. And one really powerful way to start using your attention is through mindfulness meditation. This is probably one of my favorite techniques in the whole world. I love mindfulness meditation because I felt the benefits subjectively for me, but also I've seen the science. And I'm very scientifically minded. I need a lot of evidence for the kinds of techniques I use in my life. I really struggle with just believing anything anyone says. So when I see a technique like mindfulness meditation, when I see my subjective experience align with the objective evidence, it's a no-brainer to me that I should share this with people. So what is mindfulness meditation? Basically, mindfulness is moment-to-moment awareness of the present moment without judgment. So it's a kind of being aware of everything that's going on in the moment, internally and externally. So internally, I mean your emotions, your thoughts, you're aware of that. And then you're also aware of external reality. Like I said, there's a light, a phone, a mic, a camera. But going beyond that, it's being aware of these things in a non-judgmental way. In other words, not trying to change your reality, not wishing that it were different, not saying, oh, I like this, more of this or less of that. It's not that constant judgment and evaluation. That's a different kind of mindset. The mindset of mindfulness is a bit more curious. It's a bit more open. It's a bit more accepting. It's, okay, if I feel a bit cold in my hands right now, as I do, what does that feel like? What does cold feel like if I just allow it? If I just really feel it, if I zoom into it and I allow myself to experience it, what does cold feel like? That's what mindfulness is. And mindfulness meditation is a way to become more mindful. So the meditation part is the technique part of mindfulness meditation. And meditation basically just involves practicing, for example, paying attention to your breathing, to the moment-to-moment sounds and the things you see, etc. So mindfulness meditation is a really good way to become more disciplined. Why does it help you become more disciplined? Well, we've seen scientific evidence that as you get better with mindfulness meditation, and as you meditate for more and more hours, the thickness of your prefrontal cortex increases. So this part of your brain just behind your forehead and the eyes, that increases in thickness, and it also increases in functioning. So it functions better. Why this is important to discipline is because a lot of neuroscientists believe that the prefrontal cortex is the seat of discipline. They believe that the prefrontal cortex is the area of the brain that you want operating really well if you want to be disciplined. And so basically, the prefrontal cortex is like the brake pedal in your brain, where this more impulsive, this more primordial part of you wants to have immediate pleasure. The prefrontal cortex puts the brakes on that. And it's like, whoa, buddy, let's think about what we're doing here. That's the prefrontal cortex. And so mindfulness meditation increases that. So if you practice mindfulness meditation enough, you will get a better functioning prefrontal cortex, which is essential for discipline. And that is what the attentional domain can offer you in terms of becoming more disciplined. So action step here is to start engaging in mindfulness meditation. Start with 2 minutes a day, 5 minutes a day. And you can do this by downloading a meditation app, or you can YouTube some guided meditations. That's what I often do. I just type in guided mindfulness meditation into YouTube, and then I find someone who I like, because some people's voices are just, I'll be honest, they're just a bit much. It's a bit be one with the universe, and it's a bit up in the air. It's a bit too fluffy for me, but I'm a bit skeptical and cynical and scientifically minded in general. But you do whatever works for you. Whatever works for you. Just YouTube some guided mindfulness meditations. Find someone who you like their voice, you like their way of speaking, the way they guide you, and then practice that on a daily basis. Even if it's 2 minutes, it will help you. And this isn't my opinion. This is according to the research. 2 to 5 minutes of mindfulness meditation a day actually still has an effect. So start there and then build it up as time goes by. Okay, so now the fourth doorway into discipline is self-related. So far we've been through the thinking domain, so how to change your thinking about discipline. We've been through the emotional domain, which is how to feel your feelings. We've been through the attentional domain, which is how to be more mindful. Now we're getting to the self-related domain of human functioning. The self-related domain is this domain in psychology that's all about your relationship to yourself. It's all about how do you treat yourself? Are you self-compassionate? Are you self-critical? How do you view yourself? Do you have self-esteem? What's your level of self-worth like? It's all the self-worth. That's why it's the self-related domain. Now, within the self-related domain, there are specific kinds of relationships to ourselves that we can have that will either increase or decrease our discipline. And what the research has found is that if you want to have more discipline, you need to actually learn how to define yourself as someone who is disciplined. If you start defining yourself as someone who is disciplined, if you say, you know what, I'm going to start taking on the identity of a disciplined person, then your behaviors will start to align with that. And that doesn't just apply to discipline. That applies to anything you can think of. Anything that you can think of, if you identify in that way, if you identify as a smoker, for example, you're going to keep smoking. It's only when you start defining yourself as a non-smoker, I'm not a smoker, I am not a smoker, that is when your behaviors start to align with your identity. So your identity is like this gravitational force around which your behaviors start to circle. So you want to make sure that that gravitational force is in an area where you want it to be. And the area we want it to be, for the sake of this video, is discipline. So you need to identify as that kind of person. I am not the kind of person who just gives in to their urges. I am not the kind of person who just follows their cravings. I am the kind of person who puts the brakes on cravings if they are not helpful to me, if they are not helpful to my future, if they are not helpful to where I want to be in life. That is who I am. That's identity. And that's how you tap into discipline, through the self-related domain. Now, it's not easy because a lot of us will have struggled with discipline. I was fortunate enough growing up that a lot of people called me disciplined because I would wake up early. I actually enjoyed school. I was a bit of a nerd. I would get those certificates at the end of the year that's like top achiever and stuff like that. And so I was lucky enough to have gotten lots of positive feedback about Nevern is disciplined. Nevern, oh wow, such a disciplined kid. And you know, coming from an Indian home, that's like, wow, that's like the best thing ever, to be disciplined and stoic. So lame, but it helped. It helped me. But many people aren't there. Many people have failed with their discipline. Many people have struggled, and many people have prematurely decided that they're just not a disciplined person. And in order to change that, you need to change your identity. You need to forgive yourself. You need to forgive yourself, and you need to move on, and you need to say, look, I haven't been that thus far, but I am intentionally taking on this identity to help me going forward. And whatever happened in the past Nevern, it's okay, man. You were trying. The reasons you're not disciplined, and a lot of those reasons haven't been in your control. So it's okay. It's okay. I forgive you, man. I forgive past Nevern. It's okay. Instead of beating you up, let me actually think about how to make the future better. Because that's what makes the future better. It's not beating ourselves up. It's taking accountability for who we are going forward. So the action step here is to forgive yourself. It's not beat yourself up if you fail with discipline. And it's to start to intentionally take on that identity of I am a disciplined person and I'm going to act in accordance with that. That's how you build trust in yourself. So that's the fourth domain, the self-related domain. Outside of that, you have got the motivational domain. This is another doorway into discipline, the motivational domain. Motivation is basically short form for what drives our behavior. That's our motivations. When you eat food, for example, you have a motivation to eat food. You feel hunger and you want to have some food. So motivation is all about what drives our behaviors, good and bad. Now, in order to become more disciplined, you need a certain kind of motivation to drive your behavior. You don't want it to be the short-term pleasure-seeking motivations, because those are going to pop up. As the day goes by, as the weeks go by, you're going to have these little motivations that pop up, these little urges or impulses that say, Nevern, get some cookies. Nevern, eat some donuts. Nevern, do this or do that. Hit this person, kiss this person. All sorts of motivations are going to come up. You want to intentionally think about how to get your long-term motivations to, I could say, to be fired up. How can you enlarge your long-term motivations? How can you make them more palpable, more real, bring them into the present? This is why a lot of people struggle with discipline. It's because our short-term motivations are in our faces. They're there. Like if you're hungry and you're craving something, it is there. You can feel it. It's present. But our long-term motivations, they're far away. They're abstract. You can forget about them. You can forget that you even have them. If you're eating like some really good food or having a drink or watching porn, you can really forget about your long-term goals. So the trick here is to connect. It's to reconnect to those motivations. It's to reconnect to your broader purpose, your broader passions, your broader vision, what you want for your life, what you want for the world. What's the beauty of your vision that you can connect to? And that's really, really helpful to build more discipline, because if you're connected to your long-term goals, you're more likely to be disciplined, because then you're going to do what you need to do for the long term, not just for the short term. And look, it's understandable. Again, don't beat yourself up. If we go back to the self-related domain, don't beat yourself up if you're only engaging in short-term goals or short-term pleasures and impulses. There are reasons for that. We live in a world where companies capitalize on that. That's what fast food companies do. That's what social media companies do. They're all tapping into like these deep hidden biological drives and urges. So it's really okay. Don't beat yourself up, buddy. But with that being said, how can you bring the future into your present? Your action step here, and something that I sometimes use with clients in my therapy practice, is to visualize the future. Because there's actually more emotion connected in actual mental images that we can create. If you imagine something, it can bring emotion rather than just thinking about it in a very bland way or writing down your goal on a piece of paper. That's very flat. It's like a business card. It's like it's not three-dimensional. Doesn't have any emotion in it. It doesn't have any life in it. It's not alive. But if you visualize what you want and where you want to be, that can be more motivating. So that's your action step here, is to actually visualize what you want for the future. So that's the motivational domain. Then we've got the behavioral domain. The behavioral domain is the sixth domain, and that's all about what you do with your hands and feet, the actions that you take. So the behavioral domain is a pretty obvious domain to work on here, because if you're struggling with your discipline, it is actually your behaviors, like you're putting stuff in your mouth, or you're drinking stuff, or you're getting aggressive, or you're getting hypersexual, or whatever it is. The behavioral domain is pretty obvious here. But a really useful tool from therapy to help you with your behaviors, if you're trying to build productive habits and break bad ones, is to use something called implementation intentions. So basically, it's learning how to implement what you intend to do. That's why it's called an implementation intention, because you have some sort of intention of what you want to do, and now you need to implement, you need to execute on that. A lot of us, we have the intention to eat better or to stay away from bad habits, but we fail with the implementation. So implementation intentions it drills down a bit, actually. It gets a bit more specific in terms of what you have to do. So an example that I heard from a world's leading expert in procrastination. So he actually used this to overcome his procrastination. I think it was Professor Tim Pitchell. He said that when he was learning to floss, when he wanted to build that habit and the discipline of flossing every day, he used an implementation intention. So he said that when I put my toothbrush down, I am going to pick my floss up. When I put my toothbrush down, I pick the floss up. If toothbrush down, floss picked up. And that's the thing about an implementation intention, is that it has an if-then structure. So if I put if I put my toothbrush down, then I pick my floss up and then I floss. That's how you simplify the behaviors that you need to engage in. And you can do this for anything. If I wake up, I put on my gym shoes, for example, if you want to start going to the gym more regularly. If I wake up, I put on gym clothes immediately, something like that. And that's the beauty of an implementation intention, because the if-then structure makes it very implementable. It makes it very practical, very straightforward, so you can't really rationalize your way out of that. Well, you can if you're a professional rationalizer like I am, but it makes it less likely. And that's the behavioral domain. Now, if we move on, the seventh domain and the seventh doorway into discipline is to actually work on your biology. Your biology is actually a really big determining factor in terms of whether you're going to be disciplined or not. And one of the most fundamental aspects of our biology that interfere with our discipline is sleep. I know there's been a lot of talk on social media and online, and there's a growing awareness of the importance of sleep. I think back in the day when I used to watch motivational videos and things like that, it used to be a lot of like hustle culture and rise and grind and, man, I wake up 5 a.m. and I do this, or I wake up at 4 a.m. and then you've got some, I swear I heard someone say they wake up at 2 a.m. at one point, and I was like, okay, this is getting ridiculous. Like, what's the point of this? But anyways, there's a growing awareness of the importance of sleep. I think Professor Matthew Walker, he's got a good book on that. I think it's called Why We Sleep. Very good book on the science of sleep and how important it is for us, actually. So basically what you need to know is adults need about 7 to 8 hours every night. I think he sometimes says 7 to 9. So 8 really is a sweet spot. And I know that sounds like a lot, especially for people who are used to getting 6 hours and have lots of other demands. But guys, this is an investment that if you get right, will make everything else better. Your emotions will be better regulated the next day. Your mood will be better. And most importantly, for the sake of this video, your discipline will be better. I know on the nights where I struggle to get good enough sleep, or if I struggle to get good quality sleep, man, my cravings just take over. It's like there's no contest. So discipline is really tied to the amount of sleep that you get and the quality of the sleep you get. An action step that you can take here is something simple like setting a bedtime and a wake up time. If you set some sort of stability in terms of when you go to bed and when you wake up, you'll find you'll find that your sleep will start to stabilize, and you'll start to stay asleep within that time frame because you're sort of training your body to fall asleep within certain hours. That stabilizes what's called the circadian rhythm, which is basically your internal biological clock, because we all have this sort of built-in clock into our brain that dictates our 24-hour cycle, and that you can train that clock to fall asleep and wake up at a certain time. For me, I get into bed at 9. A lot of people laugh at me for that, but trust me, the next day, it's totally worth it. If people want to laugh or talk crap about how I sleep, or I'm going to bed at the child's time, it's okay, because the next day I can see I am more disciplined. So I go to bed at 9, I wake up at 5, and I do that almost non-negotiably. So that's really, really, really important to know, is that setting a set bedtime and a set wake-up time and sticking to that for, I would say, a few weeks to a few months is really, really beneficial. And if you want to double down on that, you can even have a wind-down routine for example, an hour before bedtime, you don't engage in screens, you lower or dim the lights in your home, or you put the lights off. You don't do anything stimulating, so nothing emotionally stimulating or too cognitively stimulating where you have to think or work. A lot of people work at night. It's a bad idea because you're waking your brain up. You want to start to wind down. So if you really want to double down on your sleep and therefore have more discipline the next day, invest in a wind down routine and set a consistent bedtime and wake up time. So that's one way through into biology. We're on the 8th domain, right? The 8th domain is the social domain. So this is all about your relationships. What is the social context like? And is it helping or hindering your discipline? And there are many ways in which the social context can interfere with your discipline. One way is that a lot of us are surrounded by people who aren't disciplined. We're surrounded by people who don't value discipline. Think about it in your own life. Maybe people come to mind straight away. No shade to them. But it is true. If you're surrounded by people who don't value discipline, who aren't disciplined, you're likely to gravitate toward that direction. That applies to almost anything in life. Whether you're surrounded by ambitious people or compassionate people or whatever it is that you want to embody, they will have an influence on you. So one really important thing to do within the social domain to become more disciplined is to audit your social relationships. Who do I spend more time with? Who do I spend less time with? And is that the appropriate mix for me, given where I want to be in life? You have to do that. Or else, if that social ship sinks, man, it's going to sync with you. You're going right down. Wherever that group of friends are going, you're going with them. So pack your bags and get ready for the journey that they're taking you on. But the good news is you can consciously control that. You can choose to what degree you want to go down that avenue with them. So audit your social relationships. Be careful of the people you spend time with. Another way in which the social domain can be really useful for building discipline is to actually take pride in modeling discipline to people who are younger than you. For example, children. Actually invest in trying to be a good role model. Let's say you have children of your own, or let's say you have a niece or nephew, or they are kids in your work environment, or maybe even they're not kids, they're just like a younger sibling, or they're a younger colleague in the work office. Start to take pride in modeling discipline to them, because then suddenly it's not just about you. You've expanded this motivation to be disciplined to not just your own selfish long-term success, but also helping someone else out, being a good role model towards someone else. A lot of people find that inspiring. A lot of people find that very motivating to know that they're going to have a positive impact on the next person. And trust me, if you do model discipline, if you model impulse control, if you model not just being this pleasure-seeking animal that just eats and drinks and sleeps, and if you model that, you will feel more pride within yourself, and you'll also be having a positive influence on someone else. It's a really good way to have your cake and eat it too when it comes to discipline. So think about the social domain. Who are you spending time with? Are those people disciplined, and do they value discipline? Do they have long-term goals and a really good vision for the world? And then also think about how you can model discipline to others. So that's the 8th domain. The last domain we're going to speak about here is the contextual domain. So context is all about where are you currently living? Where are you actually located? What's happening in your life at the moment? What are the environments that you're in? All of these factors about the environment and what's going on in your life, that's context. Now, a lot of people online will say discipline is just internal. You just need to muster it up. You just need to be that kind of person. But the truth is, context matters. Where you are matters. It has an influence on our behavior. It has an influence on our internal world. Where you are matters. We internalize the things around us, and our environments can shape us. We know this this is one of the most indisputable facts in psychology. We call it nurture in psychology. To what degree does your environment influence who you are? And when it comes to discipline, it's going to influence you. Your context will influence you. So you need to think about your current environment, and you need to consciously create environments that make it easier for you to be disciplined, and you need to choose environments that make it easier for you to be disciplined. For example, a lot of people in Alcoholics Anonymous, they're told not to go to clubs, to bars, to places like that. Why? Because the context has alcohol. There's literally, the walls are alcohol. It's just boom. Okay, so that's where the context matters. That is where it matters. But, it's not just about selecting environments. It's about creating environments. Just the other day, I binged on some cookies, and it was because the cookies were here. They were in the house. So the context was one of cupboard got cookies. Cupboard got cookies, Nevern go eat cookie. And shove it down my face, so that it happened. It was the context. But I'm not going to beat myself up about it. I've made adjustments now. You guys will be happy to know there are no cookies in the house. I'm having an alternative. It's like this chocolate protein shake with a banana just blended with some almond milk. It's good. It does the job. And that's how I changed my context. And I have been disciplined these past few days. No cap. I have been more disciplined because of the context. So context matters. And so your action step is to think about two things. How can I select environments that help me be more disciplined? And how can I create environments that make me more disciplined? These are the 9 doorways into discipline. Just to recap, the thinking domain is all about how can I think about discipline in a less stressful way. The second is the emotional domain, which is all about how can I feel my feelings so that I don't have to engage in emotional coping behaviors that are not helpful. The third is the attentional domain, which is about how can I engage in mindfulness meditation to increase the functioning of this bad boy. The fourth is the self-related domain. So how can I change my relationship to myself so that I identify as someone who's disciplined? The fifth is the motivational domain, which is about how can I connect to my long-term motivations. The sixth domain is the behavioral domain, which is all about how can I use implementation intentions, some if-then statements to engage in those behaviors in a practical way. The seventh is the biological domain, which is how can I get good quality sleep for long enough so that I'm disciplined the next day. The eighth is the social domain, which is all about how do I hang out with more people who value discipline and how can I model discipline as a way to become more disciplined myself. And then finally, the ninth domain is the contextual domain, which is all about how do I create and select environments that are better for my discipline. I hope you've got value from that. Guys, if you're interested in evidence-based information, if you're interested in what does psychotherapy, what does psychology, the science of mind and behavior actually say about self-improvement, not someone's opinion, not what people are saying online, but the actual science, the actual evidence. What does that have to say about these topics that matter for actually improving my life, like habits, goal setting, procrastination, all of these sorts of things? Then this is the channel for you. You can subscribe if you want to. I'd love you to because I'm biased. It's my channel, so I want it to thrive. So don't take it from me, but if you find it valuable, hit that subscribe button, hit the notification bell so that you can be notified of the videos and so that you can watch it more and then help the algorithm, and then I win, and then I'm happy, and then I get lots of money, and then you can also know that I have lots of money, and then that will make you happy too if you like me. Anyways, subscribe. I'll see you guys soon. Bye.